So here's a thought to kick us off. What if the secret to really effective treatment isn't just what we do, but the precise when?
Right.
Imagine, a world where the timing of an intervention is just as critical, maybe even more critical, than the actual medicine or procedure itself.
That's a powerful idea.
Yeah. And today, we're diving deep into this really fascinating concept called motion theory. It's a perspective that, honestly, could fundamentally reshape how we understand health, healing, maybe even what it means to be alive.
Exactly. It's a big shift. For so long, our view of biology has been really rooted in, well, chemistry, right? Things interacting, static
The
components.
molecules bumping into each other.
Pretty much.
Uh-huh.
But what if the reality underneath all that is more dynamic, like a constant interplay of structured, rhythmic motion happening at every single level?
Okay.
That's the core idea behind motion theory. And it offers some really provocative ways to think about the body.
Okay. Structured rhythmic motion. Let's unpack that a bit. So instead of picturing like a tiny particles moving through space, are we talking more about organized vibrations, patterns that sort of create everything we see?
That's a good way to put it. It's less about things moving through space and more about space itself being structured by rhythmic activity resolving locally.
And that includes really fundamental stuff, like mass. So mass isn't just stuff. It's more like resistance.
Precisely. Mass, in this view, is basically a measure of resistance to motion redistribution, how much a particular pattern of motion resists being changed or having its rhythm altered.
Wow. Okay. And time. You mentioned time, too.
Yeah, time gets really interesting. It isn't seen as this fixed universal background, tick-tock everywhere the same.
Right.
Instead, it emerges. It's the local rate at which these rhythmic processes synchronize.
So time is almost localized, depending on the activity right there.
Exactly. Different areas, different processes can have slightly different synchronization rates. And even things like light and gravity get reinterpreted.
How so? Light and gravity.
Well, light could be seen as a kind of rhythmic collapse propagating. And gravity. Gravity is framed as a convergence, a tendency to move toward areas of higher synchronization density.
Towards denser rhythm. That's a completely different way to think about it. How does this connect back to biology? To us?
Okay, so here's where it gets really relevant for health. Motion theory suggests that absolutely everything within us operates on its own intrinsic rhythm.
Like what?
Well, think about the obvious ones, your heartbeat, your breathing.
Yeah.
But also the molecular vibrations within your DNA, the coordinated firing of neurons when you think. Everything has its own motion cycle.
Okay.
So your body isn't just a collection of parts. It's a collection of interconnected, oscillating systems. The theory uses this beautiful phrase. It calls the body a nested time machine.
A nested time machine. I like that. So our cells, tissues, organs, they all have their own internal clocks, maybe ticking at different speeds, but ideally working together.
Ideally, yes. In some kind of harmony. A synchrony?
And, okay, I think I see where this is going.
Yeah.
If that synchrony breaks down, if these internal rhythms get disrupted, fall out of step, could that be what we experience as illness?
That's precisely the central idea.
Right.
Disease isn't just about, say, a damaged cell or a chemical imbalance, though those might be results. Fundamentally, it could be a state of rhythmic desynchronization.
Happen where?
Within these localized motion zones, or microtime zones, as the theory calls them, these zones are always active, humming along beneath our awareness, like the gears inside a watch. And when the rhythms in these zones get out of whack, either with each other or with the body's overall system, that's when disease can manifest.
Okay, so if illness is like an orchestra where the violins are playing way too fast and the drums are dragging,
exactly,
then healing isn't just about fixing the broken violin string. It's about getting everyone back in tempo, restoring the synchrony.
Yes, getting the band back in rhythm. It completely reframes how we might approach treatment.
It really does, and you're saying we actually see hints of this already.
Absolutely. Look at circadian rhythms. We know things like melatonin and cortisol cycle over about 24 hours. We know this affects sleep, metabolism, everything.
Right, that's well established.
But motion theory gives a deeper why. It suggests these cycles are critical for maintaining the right rhythmic relationships within those nested time systems. Just treating symptoms without considering these underlying time dynamics might be, well, missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
Okay, that clicks. What about fasting? People talk about the benefits of intermittent fasting. How does that fit?
Well, the theory suggests fasting might act as a kind of timed trigger. It could create a specific rhythmic state, maybe a sync collapse, that cues certain processes like autophagy, the cell's cleanup system, to kick in more effectively.
So it's not just not eating, it's the timing of not eating that creates a resonant window for cleanup.
Potentially, yes. It's using time as an intervention to influence cellular rhythm. Think about chronotherapy, too, giving chemotherapy at specific times a day.
Yeah, I've heard of that, to reduce side effects, right?
Right, and increase effectiveness. Motion theory would suggest this works because cancer cells and healthy cells might actually have different dominant rhythmic patterns, different motion states.
Ah, so you hit the cancer cells when they're rhythmically vulnerable, maybe? While healthy cells are in a different phase?
Precisely. You're exploiting a temporal difference. It's not just about the chemical, it's about the timing of the chemical hitting the right rhythm.
And this could even apply to something like antibiotic resistance. That's a huge problem.
It could offer a new perspective. Instead of just thinking about random genetic mutations making bacteria resistant, what if bacteria are actively adapting by, retuning their own internal motion rhythms, shifting their timing so they become out of sync with the fixed rhythm of how our antibiotics work?
So they're dodging the treatment temporally, not just structurally.
That's the idea. It suggests a dynamic temporal adaptation is happening, which, if true, means we might need antibiotics that can adapt their own timing or target these rhythms directly.
Wow. That's a different angle entirely. What really strikes me is how this motion theory seems to connect so many different things, even stem cells.
Yes, think about stem cell differentiation. How does an unspecialized cell decide to become a heart cell or a nerve cell?
Good question. Environmental cues, signals.
Right, but what kind of cues? Motion theory proposes motion state entrainment. The idea is that the stem cell essentially synchronizes with rhythmic cues in its local environment, and that entrainment guides it towards a specific cell fate.
So the rhythm of the environment tells the cell what to become.
In a way, yes. And if those temporal cues are off or disrupted, maybe that contributes to developmental problems or even abnormal cell growth later on.
It really challenges that sort of body as a static machine view, doesn't it? Where we just swap parts or block pathways.
It absolutely does. It highlights time and rhythm as fundamental players, not just background context. When treatments don't work as expected, maybe it's not always the what. Maybe the crucial missing factor is the when.
We might be aiming at the right target, but at the wrong time for the system to respond properly.
Exactly. We're not accounting for its internal rhythmic state.
Okay, so if we really lean into motion theory, what kind of new medical approaches might emerge? The source mentions some really interesting possibilities, like resonance-timed antibiotics.
Yeah, imagine that. Antibiotics delivered not just constantly, but in precise pulses, timed specifically to hit bacteria during their most vulnerable rhythmic phases. Much more targeted.
Instead of just carpet bombing.
Right. Or think about neural entrainment therapies. For stroke recovery, maybe. Using rhythmic stimulation, light, sound, maybe electrical, to help the brain's damaged networks resynchronize.
Guiding the brain back into a healthy rhythm, not just zapping it randomly.
Exactly. It's about restoring the pattern. And what about the microbiome?
Or gut bacteria.
Yeah. Imagine synchronizing the microbiome through carefully timed nutrient pulses, influencing the whole gut ecosystem by understanding and manipulating its collective rhythms.
That's fascinating. Or laser therapies tuned to intracellular rhythms, getting light energy into cells at just the right moment in their cycle.
The potential applications are huge.
Yeah.
It fundamentally shifts the focus away from just brute force intervention towards more subtle, precisely timed modulations, working with the body's own intrinsic temporal organization rather than fighting against it or ignoring it.
So just to sum up the core idea here, time isn't just the backdrop. It's an active variable in health and disease.
Absolutely.
Illness fundamentally is like a state of desynchronization, things falling out of rhythm. And healing. Healing is the process of restoring that rhythmic harmony, getting the orchestra back in sync, playing together beautifully again.
That's a great analogy, like getting that jazz band to find its perfect swing again.
Right, and this leads to a really profound question, doesn't it? The source hints at this. What if every single disease actually has its own unique motion-time fingerprint?
Exactly. A specific pattern of rhythmic disruption.
And if we could learn to detect that specific pattern,
then we could potentially design interventions to correct that specific temporal signature. Highly personalized, rhythm-based medicine.
that is a powerful concept. Moving beyond just treating symptoms or structures to becoming, as the source put it, conductors of time within the body.
Conductors of time, I like that.
Yeah, shifting the whole paradigm From treat the cell or treat the molecule to treat the sink. What if the future of medicine isn't just about the next pill, but about understanding and orchestrating the incredibly complex, life-giving rhythms humming away inside every one of us?